Warmer weather is always just around the corner, and I have the perfect simple dress designed to sew and share with you today that you'll want to wear for all your sunny days. This is the Wide Strap Maxi Dress by Elbe Textiles. It's available for free through Peppermint Magazine, and I've left the link below so that you can download it, print it out, and sew along with me. This dress has clean French seams on the inside, elastic all along the top back for an extra perfect fit, and long side slits on both sides for even more comfort. So download your copy, cut out all your pieces, mark your notches, and let's get sewing. You will also need a piece of 1.5 inch wide elastic. The measurements for your size is listed in the pattern instructions. First, I'm going to mark my darts onto my fabric from the pattern piece using a tracing wheel and tracing paper. I'm going to place my tracing paper so that it's facing the wrong side of my fabric, and then trace with the tracing wheel, forming a straight line from each of the notches indicated on the edge of the pattern, all the way to the dot indicated for my size. Once I have those lines traced with a pen, I'm ready to use my tracing wheel to mark them onto the fabric. And now that my line is traced, I'm ready to pin my darts in place. Fold your dart in half and pin through one dart leg so that it comes out through the other dart leg. And pin all the way down. Do the same thing for both of your front darts. Now we can sew both of our darts from the outside edge to the point, leaving a tail of thread so that you can tie it in a knot at the end. Grab one of your pocket pieces and place it right sides together with the outside edge of one of your front pieces, matching your notches, and pin in place. Then we're going to sew a rectangular opening for the pocket piece. Using your ruler, draw a line 1 inch away from the edge of your fabric from notch to notch. And then extend that line from each of your notches 1 inch until it meets the line that you just drew. And now this line that we just drew, this 1 inch wide rectangle, will be our sewing guide. Do this for both pockets on both of your front pieces. Now we'll trim into this pocket stitching by about half and cut into the corners of our pockets, snipping to the stitching but not through the stitching. And do this for both of the pockets you just sewed. And now open out your pocket so that it's lying flat. And we're going to understitch the pocket to the seam allowance so that the pocket stays to the interior of the garment when we're wearing it. So to understitch, with this seam allowance facing our pocket, we're going to stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from our original stitching line. Start and stop at each of the corners that you clipped into, stitching the entire distance of this pocket opening, again 1/8 of an inch away from the original stitching. And do this understitching for both of your pocket openings for both of your front pieces. Now take one of your mirrored pocket pieces so that it mirrors one of the existing pieces that you've attached to the front piece, and place them wrong sides together because we're going to be doing French seams here. Match them up and pin the outer edges. Once they're pinned together from edge to edge, all around the outside curve, sew these pockets together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and do this for both sets of pockets. Once you have these pockets sewn together around the edges, go ahead and trim that seam allowance by about half. And then turn your pocket right side out. Now that it's right side out, give your pocket a really good press. And now that these pockets are facing each other right sides together, sew this outer seam once again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that our French seams are complete, take the pocket that is sewn to the front of your dress and place this pocket piece only wrong sides together with the front of your dress. And pin around this entire pocket opening seam so that you have crisp corners here. So here, now I've pinned the pocket that's sewn to the front of the dress, wrong sides together with the front of my dress. And I'm going to top stitch around this entire pocket opening, these 3 sides with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And now that I have that one pocket top stitched to the front of my dress, and then I can turn it over and pin the pocket to the front of the dress above and below the pocket opening, and baste in place the upper and lower parts of the pocket to the front of the dress so that they don't move around on us as we move forward. Now place both of your front pieces wrong sides together, pin together your entire center front seam, and then sew your center front seam with the 1/4 inch seam allowance from the top of your dress to the hem of your dress. And now trim this center seam by about half. And then turn these 2 pieces over this seam so that they're right sides facing. And give this center seam a really good press. Now that I've pressed this center front seam and my pieces are right sides facing, I'm going to sew my center front seam again with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that we're done stitching our center front seam and we've created this nice and enclosed French seam on the inside, press this French seam with your iron either to the right or to the left, and then top stitch your French seam from top to bottom of your dress on the side that you've pressed your French seam to, 1/8 of an inch away from your center front seam. On both of the bottom edges of your front and back pieces, you have these edges that stick out and turn into a pointed slit just below your pocket. We're going to take the raw edges of these lower dress sections and press them to the wrong side by about 1/8 of an inch. Do this on both sides of both your front and back pieces. Also do this along the bottom hem of your dress, pressing again about 1/8 of an inch to the wrong side, and do this for your front and back piece as well. At the very bottom of your front and back dress, you have notches on your pattern piece that indicate your fold line for the hem. So fold up the hem of your dress along that notch and pin the corners in place. Now sew these bottom side seams just to catch this fold with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Do this on both sides of your front and back dress. Now that I've sewn that fold in place, I'm going to trim that bottom corner and grade this seam. Just going to take this seam of the folded part and just trim this one layer by about half. And then you can turn this hem right side out. Do this on both sides of your dress for both your front and back pieces. Now that you've turned this corner of your hem right side out, it will automatically cause this side seam to want to roll to the inside as well. So we're going to follow that turn in, which should be about 3/8 of an inch, and fold and press it all the way up so that it naturally meets this slit point on the side of your dress, and then pin in place. Remember that when we pin this section, that 1/8 inch that we pressed earlier is tucked to the inside for a nice clean finish on the bottom slit. Now that I've pinned this one side, I'm also going to fold the hem of my dress to the wrong side, also catching this 1/8 fold that I pressed earlier at the inside, and pin in place from side to side. Now that I've pinned my bottom hem in place, I'm going to pin the other side of my dress, the side slit, from the hem to the slit area, just as I did on the other side. And now we're going to edge stitch along the inner fold of this side slit from top to the hem, and pivot at the hem corner so that you can continue edge stitching at the top of this fold from one side of the hem all the way to the other, pivoting one final time on the other side of your hem so that you can edge stitch in the same way all the way up your side slit. Follow the same exact process for both your front and back dress pieces. Now place the front and back of your dress wrong sides together and pin the side seam from the top to where your French seam begins at the lower part of your dress. Sew this side seam with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once that side seam is sewn, you're going to trim it, turn the pieces so that they're right sides facing, give it a good press, and sew that seam again with the 1/4 inch seam allowance, just as we did for the French seam at our center front seam. Do this for both sides of your dress. For your strap piece, fold it in half, right sides facing, and pin the long edge. Do this for both straps, and sew your raw pinned edges with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Once they're sewn, turn them right side out and press them both flat. Now line up your straps facing the right side of the front of your dress so that the raw edges fall in line with the notches marked in your front pattern piece. The seam of your strap should be facing the outside of your dress. And pin in place. Baste both of your straps to the front of your dress with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now that the straps are attached to the front of the dress, take the strap over to the back of the dress so that it's facing the right side of the back of the dress and pin between the notches indicated for the back of the dress. Baste your straps to the back of the dress and then try on your dress to make sure you're happy with the length of the straps. If you'd like them to be a little bit shorter, take out your basting stitches, cut off any excess that you don't need, and then baste them back in place. With right sides together, line up the side seams of your facings and pin in place. Sew these seams with a 3/8 inch seam allowance and press the seams open. Along the bottom edges of our front facing, there are these sharp inner corners. I'm going to do a little bit of stay stitching on either side of the corner. So I'll start stitching about 1 inch away from the corner, and I'll stop stitching about 1 inch away from the other side of the corner. So I'm going to stitch from pin to pin with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to do this on both sides. And now that I've stitched into these corners, I'm going to clip into the corners to but not through the stitching on both sides. And this will give me the ease that I need to fold this section to the wrong side and press this 1/4 inch seam allowance to the wrong side all along the front of my facing, and then pivoting at that corner and continuing to press that 1/4 inch seam allowance to the seam and continuing all along the back facing. Now place the upper raw unpressed edge of your facings right sides together with the upper edge of your dress and pin in place, sandwiching your straps in between. Pin all the way around the front, the underarms, and the back of the dress, remembering also to match your side seams. Sew all around your facing, attaching it to your dress with a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Now that that's sewn on, clip into the curved area of the seam that will be under your arm, to but not through the stitching. And do this on both sides. And then we're going to understitch the entire facing. So pull out your facing so that it's lying flat, and press your seam so that it's toward your facing. And then we're going to stitch this seam to the facing 1/8 of an inch away from our original stitching line. Once you reach the corners, your presser foot won't be able to stitch all the way to the corner, so just stitch as far as you can, stop, and then start a new stitch to continue understitching. And then turn your facing to the inside of the dress and give that entire facing seam a really good press. And now working from the inside of the dress, we're going to pin the back facing only to the wrong side of the dress, pinning at the bottom of the facing, catching that 1/4 inch fold that we pressed to the inside to the inside. And now that we've pinned the back facing from seam to seam, edge stitch all along the inner bottom fold of your facing from seam to seam. Now grab your elastic, attach a safety pin to one end, and draw it through your back facing at the opening from seam to seam. You can pin one side of your elastic in place so that you don't lose it as you continue pulling the elastic to the other side. And pin your elastic in place on the other side as well. With your elastic secured in place on both ends, try on your dress to make sure that you're happy with the length of your elastic, and when you're happy with the length, stitch in the ditch at both side seams, securing your elastic within the seam, making sure that you have at least 3/8 of an inch of elastic extending beyond that seam. And now the very last step is to pin our front facing on the inside of the dress, just as we did the back facing. From seam to seam, keeping that pressed raw edge folded to the inside as you pin. Edge stitch from seam to seam along that inner fold of the facing all the way from one end to the other, and you are all done with your dress.
Thank you for watching this sew along. Make sure you subscribe for more videos and sewing inspiration. I'll see you next time.